After my husband passed, my son said, "Mom, you shouldn't be living alone in such a big house." I thought he'd finally come around, that maybe he wanted to be close to look after me. But when he moved in with his wife and kids, the truth surfaced quickly. He went through my checkbooks, took notes on my account balances, brought in someone to appraise the property, even drew up a draft agreement, all without asking. He contacted a real estate agent behind my back. That's when it hit me, they weren't here for me. They were here for this house. For my pension checks. But what they seemed to forget was, this house still had my name on the deed. It's been a full week since David passed. That morning was gray and damp, the tall pine trees outside brushing against each other in the wind like they were whispering grief. I sat in the living room rocker with his favorite mug cradled in my hands. It was filled with black coffee I'd brewed that morning, bitter like the taste of my own thoughts. The house was silent, save for the dull ticking of the old wall clock, each second thudding like a soft blow reminding me, you're alone now. David and I had moved to this little coastal town 3 decades ago. We paid off the mortgage together. Planted that maple tree out back together. He used to say, when we're old we'll sit on the porch swing and watch the leaves change from green to red to gone. He said he loved autumn. It's when the world finally gets quiet, he'd say. I used to tease him for being too sentimental. But now I understand he knew. He knew there'd come a day I'd sit out there by myself saying nothing. Just listening to the wind. Rosa, my neighbor, let herself in through the back door like she always did. No knocking, her footsteps so soft you'd barely know she was there. "Did you eat?" she asked while rummaging through the fridge, her voice laced with worry. I waved her off. "I'm fine. Had some coffee this morning." She paused for a moment, then closed the fridge and came to sit beside me. "Helen, I know you're trying to be strong. But you don't have to carry this grief alone. David's gone, but you can't lose yourself too. You haven't asked yourself what you want, not in a long time." I forced a smile. "I thought I was ready, Rosa. I've lived in fear for years, not knowing when David's last breath would come. But when it finally did, it was like the world moved on and I didn't." She gently took my hand. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was steady. "You carried him for so long. Now it's time to carry yourself." I didn't answer. She was right and I knew it. David had been sick for 6 years. In the final 2 I barely left the house. Every hour revolved around him. Not out of duty. Out of love. He needed me the way I'd once needed him. Our son Eric always said he was too busy with work. At most he'd visit twice a year. 2 nights, tops. He'd bring the whole family, say something like, "Mom, you're amazing," and leave before the coffee pot had cooled. On David's last night at the hospital he held my hand. His eyes were clear like they'd traveled back in time to his younger self. "Helen," he whispered. "Promise me you'll live well after. Live for you." That promise has echoed in my mind ever since, like the ticking of the clock today. Steady. Piercing. As Rosa stood to leave, she patted my shoulder. "I'll stop by this afternoon. I'll bring some maple sugar pie." She'd barely stepped off the porch when her brow furrowed. She turned back. "That car out front, is it Eric's?" I didn't even have time to respond before the doorbell rang. That kind of slow, overly casual knock. It was Melissa. I stood up and made my way to the door. The moment I opened it, there was Eric, dressed in a suit, jacket draped over one arm, the other hand gripping the handle of a rolling suitcase. Melissa stood next to him, wearing a t-shirt that read "Family First," grinning into her phone for a selfie, the front porch of my house perfectly framed in the background. Behind them was Ethan, head down, eyes glued to his phone, earbuds in, a backpack slung over his shoulder, plastered with stickers from his favorite video games. "Hi, Mom." Eric reached out with a breezy smile that felt oddly misplaced. "We've been thinking, and we've decided to move in with you." Melissa lowered her phone and immediately softened her expression, her voice laced with practiced warmth. "You've been alone too long. And we think now more than ever what matters most is family." Ethan chimed in. "Grandma, can I turn your basement into my gaming room? I promise I'll keep it quiet." I stood frozen with my hands still on the doorknob, unable to respond. As if rehearsed, they rolled their luggage straight into the house. The wheels screeched across the hardwood floors, loud and jarring, like they already belonged here. Eric patted my shoulder. "Dad's gone, Mom. It's just you and us now. We're family. We take care of each other. You don't have to do this alone anymore." I nodded, eyes stinging. not from his words but from something I couldn't quite name. Or maybe I could. I had seen that exact Family First shirt on Melissa's social media countless times. It was one of her props, used in her heartwarming family life videos. The kind that scored her the most views and sympathy. Even now, she was subtly angling her phone again, making sure the corner of my living room made it into the frame. And for some reason, a faint unease crept into my chest, like noticing a wrinkle in the throw blanket under your feet. Small but impossible to unsee. In the days that followed, the house became unrecognizably loud. There was always something clanging in the kitchen. Melissa, now donning a hoodie that read #MomLife, would be whisking eggs while live streaming, chirping into her phone, "Today's breakfast with 3 generations under one roof." Her voice pierced through the mic, unnaturally bright, her exaggerated tone practically selling the image of perfect happiness. I lingered at the edge of the dining room, watching Eric fumble with the coffee maker. He pressed the wrong button and coffee spilled everywhere. He shrugged and laughed. "Mom, this thing hates me. Every time I try to use it, something goes wrong." I smiled faintly, stepping in to wipe the mess. "That's the cleaning cycle button. You didn't press brew." He gave me a sheepish look. "See? This is why we need you around." I didn't answer. I just tossed the damp cloth into the laundry basket. Melissa finished her recording and flipped the camera to face the living room. "This right here. That's what I mean by the warmth of home. A parent's house is filled with their memories, and our new beginnings." That last part made my chest tighten. She'd said, "our new beginnings," not helping Helen start over. The breakfast table was buzzing with energy. Ethan sat on the wooden bench, munching on toast while glued to his tablet. He was polite to the point of stiffness, asking, "Grandma, can you please pass the juice?" But never looking up from the screen, his fingers swiping constantly. "Hey Grandma, what's the Wi-Fi password again? My game kept lagging last night." He glanced at me, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. I mumbled the password. He typed it in and didn't say thank you. After breakfast, while I was at the sink doing dishes, I overheard Melissa talking to Ethan in a low voice. I wasn't supposed to catch it, but I did. "For now, just be good, okay? Don't get on Grandma's nerves. Give it a few weeks and I'll get you that new gaming laptop you wanted." Ethan's voice was a barely contained whisper of excitement. "For real? The Alienware one?" "Of course," she replied, tapping his forehead with a smile. "As long as you act like a mature little man." I stood there, the sound of water rushing over plates almost covering the sudden knot in my stomach. I thought they said money was tight, that they moved in because they were worried I was lonely. But how could Melissa so easily promise a laptop that costs over $2,000? And if it was Eric paying, then none of this made sense. Just last year he borrowed money from David to catch up on his car loan. I dried my hands and walked into the living room. Melissa was uploading a photo of breakfast to her channel. The caption read, "Mom's kitchen is back. A joyful morning with 3 generations under one roof." I looked at the picture. My face was barely visible, blurred at the edge of the frame, like a prop in a carefully staged scene. That afternoon, Rosa came by with a homemade maple pie. The moment she stepped inside, she frowned. "What's going on in here?" When I walked up, I thought I'd wandered onto the set of a family reality show. I gave a small laugh. "They're documenting family life. It's trendy now, this whole real-life moments thing." Rosa walked into the kitchen and placed the pie on the table. "Real? Helen, your house feels like a stage right now. You're the one they call the star, but no one's giving you a single line." I stayed quiet for a moment, then said, "They seem happy. Even Ethan started calling me Grandma again." She sat down and began slicing the pie, her tone slower, measured. "Since when has your son become so devoted? Do you remember 2 years ago when David was in the hospital? Eric said he was too busy with work. He didn't come even once." I nodded, offering a faint, bitter smile. "I remember. Back then I kept telling myself, maybe he just didn't know how to handle seeing his father that way." Rosa shook her head. "That's not it. He's always known how to handle himself. That's the only thing he's ever prioritized." I didn't argue. I couldn't, not with her. Not with myself. All those years, every time something happened to David, it was me on the phone. Me alone. Eric always had an excuse. Business trips or taking Ethan to camp. And still I kept finding reasons to forgive him. Even when there were none left. Rosa looked at me with softened eyes. You've always been a good wife. A good mom. But Helen, love can't keep being your blind spot. Not every smile hides good intentions. I lowered my eyes to the pie on the table. The syrup dripped slowly down the edges like time folding in on itself. I wanted to say I was fine. That I could handle this. But my throat caught and nothing came out. That night I sat in my room with David's old notebook. During his illness he'd sometimes jot down thoughts. The first page read, "If I'm ever gone, Helen, promise me you'll get some real sleep. No more 3 a.m. meds in the kitchen." I closed the notebook, eyes stinging. Upstairs I could hear Ethan cheering. Probably another online match one. Melissa's laugh came through the wall next to mine. "Honey, look at this comment. It's hilarious." The TV in the living room blasted a football game. Eric must have cranked up the volume. Every shout from the players seemed to shake the walls. I turned off the lamp and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Everything was so loud. So alive. But I'd never felt more alone. I never thought I'd have to start asking permission in my own home. That morning I woke early and headed to the kitchen to make oatmeal. But I couldn't find my old pot. Melissa had cleaned the kitchen the night before and decided to organize everything. After rummaging through half the cabinets, I finally found it jammed behind a stack of clear glass bowls under the sink, shoved to the corner like it didn't belong. As I stood up, I remembered David's old radio. It was still in the dining room cabinet, hadn't yet been moved back to the bedroom. He used to sit with the paper and listen to Jazz FM, always saying it was what made the day settle. I walked over to look for it, but the cabinet was empty. I found Melissa in the living room and asked, "Did you see a black radio? The one with the silver dial?" She didn't even look up. "Oh, that thing?" I took it to the curb for pickup. It was old and dusty, didn't look good on camera. I froze. My throat tightened. I couldn't speak. It wasn't about money. That radio had been on nearly every day during David's final years. The sound of it made this house feel like it still breathed. Sometimes when I couldn't sleep, I'd sneak out just to hear the late-night broadcasts, because it felt like he was still nearby. Still in the next room. And Melissa tossed it just like that. Without a word. I rushed outside to the recycling bins hoping to retrieve it. But I dug through every bag and didn't find it. It was gone. And somehow it felt like a piece of me was gone too. Breakfast went as usual. The three of them ate and I cleaned up after. I was just about to sit at the table with my half-cold bowl of oatmeal when Ethan tossed the remote on the couch and shouted, "Grandma, can you not chew so loud when you eat?" I froze, looking over at him. He was sprawled out on the sofa, already playing on the new gaming console they'd just gotten. Melissa had ordered it online a few days ago, on my card. Eric had laughed and said, "A reward for our model son." Not a single thank you was directed at me. I didn't respond. Just picked up my bowl and took it to my room. As I closed the door behind me, I heard them chatting about what takeout to order for lunch. That afternoon I decided to tidy up the study. But the moment I opened the door, I barely recognized the space I once knew like the back of my hand. Half the bookshelf was emptied, now crammed with Ethan's trophies, toy figures, Bluetooth speakers and rows of video game cases. The drawer where I kept my novels and personal journals had been pried open. Inside were comic books and a pair of game controllers. "How did you even get in here?" My voice came out sharper than I expected. Ethan didn't look away from his screen. "Didn't you say I could use it?" "I said you could borrow it, not gut and redesign it." He shrugged. "Mom and Dad said no one was using it anyway, so I might as well have my own space." I stood there feeling like an intruder. The hallway light cast my shadow across the carpet, thin, stretched and fading at the edges. Just like me in this house. At dinner, Melissa suddenly lit up with what she called a brilliant idea. "Helen," she said, slicing her salmon with delicate precision, "I was looking into schools for Ethan yesterday. If we moved to that lakeside neighborhood, it'd be just 5 minutes from a top-rated school, and the area's appreciating fast." Eric jumped in immediately. "Yeah, we looked too. Prices are climbing every year. If you sold this place, we could put a down payment on something newer in a better environment." I set my knife and fork down, trying to steady my tone. "And where would you all be buying?" Melissa smiled sweetly. "With you, of course. Isn't it better to have 3 generations under one roof?" I didn't reply. I just stared at her. Eric kept going. "This house is pretty old, Mom. And it's costing you. Remember the roof leak during that big storm? You can't keep managing this place alone. Melissa chimed in between bites. We'd get something with a yard, give you your own suite. We'd install a full security system. And with your pension coming in steady, you wouldn't feel the mortgage burden. It could even improve your quality of life. They spoke so casually like it was a business plan. A portfolio move. But I saw it clearly now. They wanted this house. They wanted my savings. They wanted me to step aside quietly to make room for their lives, their comfort, their story. After dinner, I sat in the backyard holding David's old straw hat. He used to loosen the soil under the maple tree around this time of day, mumbling, "When Ethan hits middle school, we'll throw him a birthday party right here under the tree." That party never happened. No one's mentioned that tree since. Later that night, I went upstairs to find some old bills. Stuff I kept in the spare room that used to house our winter coats and family files. Melissa had cleared it out completely. She said she wanted a peaceful space for yoga. I opened the old wall cabinet. At the very bottom, beneath a rolled yoga mat, was a pink file folder. I thought it was hers. But inside were property evaluation reports, printed copies, 2 pages of mortgage consultation notes. One line made my skin crawl. Recommended listing price. 95% of current market value for expedited sale. Ideal for dual title or estate transition structures. A real estate agent's name was listed at the bottom. Someone I'd never heard of. In the margin, a note read, "Owner appears highly cooperative. Estimated closing within 3 months." My name was at the top. The signature line was blank. My hands went cold. I tucked the pages back into the folder, hid them under my stack of sweaters, and buried them at the bottom of the closet. On my way back in, I saw Melissa sitting in the front yard on a call, laughing breezily. "Yeah, Eric's mom is still living here. But she's moving to assisted living soon. We're taking over the place. Yes, it's a beautiful layout." I stepped back inside and closed the door. That night I didn't sleep. The voice in my head, one I'd tried for weeks to silence, finally said what I was too afraid to admit. Eric hadn't come home to care for me. They came to take over. When I got back from the grocery store, the house was unusually quiet. But the moment I stepped into the living room, I felt like I'd walked into someone else's home. The framed photos of David and me, our wedding anniversary portrait, the snapshots from trips and family holidays, were gone from the walls. In their place hung a cold-toned abstract print, the kind you'd see staged in a showroom at an IKEA clearance sale. It had no warmth, no story. The couch cushions had been swapped out for ones in muted beige and slate gray. A heavy wool throw had replaced the old quilt, its designer tag still dangling from the corner. Melissa stood in the corner, phone in hand, panning slowly for a panoramic video. She fussed with a bottle of Reed diffuser on the coffee table, narrating cheerfully to the camera. "Just giving everyone a look at our new layout. Modern luxe vibes for the next chapter of life." She paused when she saw me at the doorway, blinking once before flashing that all-too-familiar sweet smile. "Oh, Helen. You're back. We didn't touch any of your stuff. Just optimized the space a little. Look, so much more natural light, right? Doesn't it feel so open now?" I scanned the room, my eyes landing on the empty corner where David's old recliner used to be. It was his favorite chair. He used to sit there with the radio humming, reading the paper, sometimes dozing off mid-sentence. The arms were smooth from years of wear. The seat cushions still bore the faint marks of Cheddar's teeth. "What about the chair?" I asked, keeping my voice as steady as I could. "Oh, that," Melissa said lightly. "It's in storage." It was way too bulky and didn't really match the aesthetic for the listing photos. I stood there, feeling like a guest who'd wandered into a home where none of the doors were meant for her anymore. She said it offhandedly, but I caught every word. Listing photos. I didn't ask who was selling the house. I didn't ask whether I had agreed to it. I just sat down slowly and stared at the coffee table. Something was being taken from me, piece by piece, breath by breath. A few days later, I went into my bedroom to find David's old toolbox. I needed to change a light bulb. I searched through the closets and found that some of the cardboard boxes I used to store winter clothes had been moved. One even had its lid half open. These boxes hadn't been touched in years. I knelt down and opened the top one. On top were a few old ledgers, beneath them some bank envelopes, my Social Security account statements, and several printed emails about pension adjustments. My fingers froze on one of the pages. Someone had gone through them, rearranged by date, neatly stacked. I never organized them that way. I remember tossing them into the box haphazardly years ago. Now they looked reviewed, analyzed. That night I couldn't sleep. I grabbed one of David's old knit cardigans and stepped out for a walk. The wind was sharp, stinging my ears as I passed the post office near the corner of town. That's where I ran into Rosa, her old Labrador trotting beside her. Her gait was slow but steady. She spotted me from a distance, her brow creasing with concern as she waved. "Helen, couldn't sleep either? You look unsettled." I forced a smile. "Been having trouble sleeping lately." She didn't reply, just reached out and gave my hand a gentle pat. We walked together down the asphalt path that hugged the edge of the neighborhood. After a few minutes I finally spoke. "Do you remember that lawyer you mentioned? Naomi Vega?" She blinked then nodded. "Of course. My cousin's daughter. She's sharp. Works as deputy director at the Women's Legal Aid Center downtown. I think I need her contact info." Rosa looked at me for a beat, didn't ask why. She just slipped a wrinkled note from her coat pocket. "I should have given you this a long time ago." As I took the paper, my fingers trembled. I couldn't tell if it was from the cold, or the weight of finally choosing to do something. She looked at me and said softly, "You don't have to wait until they push you off a cliff to decide where you want to stand." I nodded. My nose stung, like her words had loosened the tightest knot in my chest. I folded the note and tucked it deep into my pocket. That day I went to the community library and checked out a gardening manual. Not because I suddenly wanted to grow petunias. I just needed an excuse to leave the house. Lately the air inside had felt off, like someone had quietly shut off the ventilation and installed a hidden camera, waiting to see when I'd stop fitting into the script. At 2:30 in the afternoon I came home with the book bag slung over my arm. The moment I opened the front door, I was hit by the sharp, cloying scent of Melissa's favorite scented candles, her go-to for live streams. As I was taking off my shoes, I heard an unfamiliar woman's voice from the living room. "Oh, the natural light is wonderful, especially with that south-facing window in the afternoon. If you painted the walls a soft beige it'd be perfect. And the kitchen's a decent size. Just needs some cabinet refacing and this place would be ideal for family buyers." I froze. Before I even stepped into the room, Melissa's voice chimed in. "We'd like to move quickly, really. My mother-in-law's getting older and this two-story layout just isn't practical anymore. She's been afraid of the stairs at night." I stood there, 1 foot raised, the book bag nearly slipping from my hand. In the living room sat a woman I'd never seen before, wearing a gray blazer and scrolling through home listings on a tablet. She was nodding along, her tone upbeat and professional. On the coffee table lay a printed property listing proposal. Eric stood beside her, dressed in the light blue button-down he only ever wore to formal meetings. Melissa glanced back and saw me. Her smile tightened into that familiar expression, the one that said, "You picked the worst possible time to come home." "Oh, Helen. You're back," she said, waving a little too casually. "This is Diana, a real estate consultant we're talking to. Just a quick stop to check the layout. Nothing's final, just getting some preliminary ideas." Diana stood and gave me her best professional smile. "Hello, Mrs. Monroe. I heard you've lived here a long time. This house has great potential. From what I've seen, it's a high-demand layout for the market." I didn't take the hand she offered. "I don't recall authorizing any consultation on this property," I said, keeping my voice even, but loud enough to quiet the room. Eric cleared his throat. "Mom, we're just exploring options. We're not selling. But with the market like this, if you ever wanted to move or—" "I haven't said anything about moving," I replied, meeting his eyes. "And I haven't said this house is too much for me to handle." Melissa tugged at his sleeve. "Honey, don't overreact. She's just not there yet. We haven't made any decisions, we're just preparing." I glanced around the room. The abstract painting was still on the wall. My photos were still missing. The listing packet on the coffee table had 4 pages. The top one read, "Projected close, within 90 days. "Whose house is this?" I asked. Silence. Eric looked away, jaw clenched. I slowly set my bag down on the chair and sat, hands folded on my lap, eyes fixed on the paperwork. "Did you go through my ledgers too? My bank statements? While you were at it, did you run the numbers on my Social Security and pension?" Melissa's smile twitched. "Helen, that's not what this is about. We just want to help manage things more efficiently with a longer-term economic perspective. That's when the doorbell rang. I got up and opened it. It was Rosa. She didn't smile. Instead, she raised her brow. Didn't you say you'd be out all day? I came back early, I said softly. She peered inside and locked eyes with Eric. His face stiffened, he turned away. Rosa stepped inside, her voice calm but pointed. Oh, guess. What a coincidence. I actually brought some garden layout sketches. Thought Helen might want to see our design from the city show last year. She glanced at me and winked. Do you have a minute? I nodded. Of course. Then I turned to Diana. I have no intention of selling this home. Not now. Not in any foreseeable future. If you need formal confirmation, I can have my attorney send you a written statement. Diana gave a tight smile and quickly gathered her things. Understood. No problem at all. Melissa shot me a look, her lips nearly biting into themselves. Eric pulled her aside and whispered something I couldn't hear. I didn't care. Rosa and I walked into the dining room as Diana's footsteps faded behind us, along with the rustling of paper and the front door clicking shut. Rosa sat across from me. Only after the house was quiet again did she speak. I knew it. I said nothing. I unzipped my book bag and placed the pristine gardening manual on the table. She let out a soft sigh. So what now? You gonna wait until they take your keys or change the locks yourself? I didn't answer. But my heart was already speaking for me. I always thought meeting a lawyer would feel cold. Impersonal. But when I stepped into Naomi Vega's office and saw her, glasses perched on her nose, gently explaining the details of a medical trust to an elderly woman with the kind of patience that wasn't rehearsed, I nearly cried. Mrs. Monroe, come in, she greeted me with a calm, warm voice. Rosa told me about you. I nodded, clutching the printed property evaluation and the photocopies of my ledgers, pages that had clearly been rifled through. Naomi listened to my story without interrupting. Then she stood and retrieved a form from her filing cabinet. First, you need to understand this. The deed is in your name 100%. No one else can do a thing with this house unless you willingly sign it over. Period. She paused, her eyes kind but firm. But moral obligation doesn't hold up in court. We need paperwork. Enforceable ones. She gave me 3 recommendations. First, change the beneficiary designation on my pension account. Remove the default, next of kin clause. Second, file a notarized restriction that prevents the house from being sold within 10 years, and have it recorded officially. Third, establish a healthcare proxy and durable power of attorney, not naming Eric but someone of my choosing or held in trust by her office as backup. You can take your time with this, she said, but the moment you walked in here I could see, you've already decided. I nodded. When I signed the first form my hand was shaking. But not from fear. From the lightness that followed. Like taking off a pair of shoes that had been too tight for far too long. I came home just as the sun was setting. The living room was dark. Only the kitchen's yellow overhead light was on. Melissa was mixing a bowl of Caesar salad, the kind she only made when she was filming. Ethan crouched in front of the TV, hammering at his controller. Eric leaned against the fridge, scrolling on his phone with one hand and holding a beer in the other. I stepped inside and said, starting this month I won't be covering your living expenses anymore. Melissa's fork froze midair. Sorry, what did you just say? I've frozen the supplementary credit cards. The car insurance is now separate. And the grocery membership has been unlinked. From now on you're responsible for yourselves. Eric frowned. Mom, we agreed this was a shared living arrangement. If it's shared, I said, then it needs to go both ways. Not just me paying for all of you. Melissa let out a sharp laugh. So now we're freeloaders? Seriously, Helen, don't be so emotional. I didn't reply. I simply walked over to the dining table and placed a sealed envelope on it. Inside were copies of the legal documents Naomi and I had signed. If you don't believe me, feel free to have your lawyer look it over. Ethan muttered, over a few game cards and some sneakers? Grandma, really? I looked at him, voice steady. This isn't about cards or shoes. It's about you learning that nobody gets to live off someone else forever. None of them responded. In the kitchen, the light flickered as Melissa turned on the stove fan. It made a sharp pop, like something electric had snapped. A few days later, Rosa called me. Have you been online lately? No. Why? Melissa posted a video. She's really laying it on thick. I opened my tablet. There she was in our living room. The camera was carefully angled to show the abstract painting and the color-coordinated cushions. We just wanted to be there for her and I never thought she'd treat us like this, she sobbed. I'm just a daughter-in-law, a mom trying to keep the family together. The comments poured in. Maybe her mother-in-law's got dementia. She's hoarding her pension while the younger ones are footing all the bills? I didn't comment. Didn't get angry. I just turned off the video and flipped the tablet face down. That night I barely slept. At 2 a.m. I went downstairs for a glass of water and found Rosa standing at the back door, holding a bottle of red wine. Knew you'd be up, she said. I was right, wasn't I? We sat in the kitchen, lights off except for the tiny one over the stove. Why would she make that video? I asked. Rosa took a sip of wine and smiled. She's not telling your story. She's performing one her followers will cry over. Doesn't matter how bad the acting is, there's always an audience. I said nothing, but inside I felt something cold and precise prick at my chest. Not pain. Awareness. Rosa set down her glass and said, You know that used bookstore on East Main? The owner's retiring. I shook my head. Tiny place. Cheap rent. I saw the sign the other day and thought, if you ever wanted to do something maybe you should go check it out. I looked at her but didn't respond right away. I'm not saying open a store tomorrow, she added. But didn't you say you always wanted to organize your books someday? Maybe even display them. I nodded. The kitchen clock ticked softly in the silence, like time itself was slowly unfolding, pulling a thread I'd never dared to tug at before. Maybe it was time. Maybe I could open something of my own. It was a gray day, the clouds pressed low like the sky itself was holding its breath. I was at the dining table flipping through an old recipe book, thinking maybe I'd make some potato chowder for dinner. The yellow light in the kitchen flickered twice, voltage acting up again. Out of habit, I went down to the basement to check the fuse box. The moment my foot hit the last step, I heard Eric's voice on the phone. She's holding out, but not for long. The paperwork's all set. Once she signs, it's done. He paused, then let out a short laugh. Of course I know she's not stupid. But she's old. Who wants to blow up the whole family? Once the house is ours, she can live wherever. Assisted living's fine. Saves us from having to deal with her. I stood at the stairwell landing, one hand on the cold railing. The basement lights were off. I stood there in the half-dark, waves of clarity sweeping over me. Not anger, but something colder. Deeper. Like standing barefoot on concrete at dawn in winter. Sharp, nerve-deadening truth. I didn't say a word. Just backed up the stairs slowly and walked into the kitchen. The kettle was already whistling. I turned off the stove and sat down at the table waiting. I wasn't giving them another easy way out. 2 days later, Melissa asked if we could talk. She picked 3 p.m. Ethan was in school, the house was quiet. She made 2 cups of rose tea in her delicate pink and white porcelain set. She slid a stack of documents across the table toward me. This is a property transfer authorization. We've talked to a lawyer who can handle the listing, escrow, and your move to the retirement community. It's all above board. I didn't touch the papers. He kept going. We're not trying to force you. We just want you to understand we're struggling too. Ethan's about to start high school, the mortgage payments are killing us. You always said family comes first. I finally spoke, my voice soft. Have you ever heard the saying, you can't build your life by stealing someone else's foundation? She blinked, the smile on her face cracking slightly. I looked her dead in the eye. You all walked into this house saying it was to be with me. And now you're sitting here asking me to sign away everything I've built in my lifetime. You want the house, the pension, my last exit. And you expect me to smile and say thank you. Her voice turned sharp. Helen, that's not fair. Eric's your son. We're not strangers. I stood, slowly pushing the papers back toward her. I've retained legal counsel. That agreement has no legal standing without my signature. And I won't sign it. Not now, not ever. Her voice rose, brittle and defensive. You'd really push your own family away over a few aging walls and a roof? I met her gaze, calm and steady. I'm not the one doing the pushing. The door opened. Keys clattered. Eric walked in, took one look at us and didn't even pretend to be surprised. His face sagged with tired irritation. He dropped his bag and picked up the paperwork. Mom, you know if you do this you're cornering us. leaving us no options. I didn't let him finish. I should have cornered you a long time ago, because you've treated me like an atom, not a mother. Melissa stood abruptly, her face tight, lips pressed into a line. She looked like she wanted to argue again, but no words came out. Eric held the papers tightly, the thin sheets crinkling in his fist. His voice dropped, icy. You're tearing this family apart. I looked at him then, really looked. This was the boy I once screamed 20 hours into the world for. And now here he was, a man standing across from me like I was a negotiating party, not his mother. I said quietly, I'm not tearing anything apart. You were never willing to hold this family up yourselves. You just kept reaching out, for more of what your father and I built. He had no response. His hand clenched tighter like it was the last bit of pride he had left. I turned and walked into the kitchen, opened the cupboard, started washing potatoes. I didn't look back. But I heard the crash when Melissa knocked over one of the porcelain cups. It shattered in two. The front door slammed behind them, loud and final, like something had left for good. That morning I made pancakes with a touch of orange zest and a hint of cinnamon, Ethan's favorite. But he didn't come down to eat. Melissa said he was having a rough day, and was attending virtual class in his room. Eric sat at the table scrolling through his phone while sipping coffee. I slid an envelope across to him. Inside was a formal notice prepared and stamped by Naomi's firm. This is a legal notice, I said calmly, settling in with my plate. Starting next month I'll be initiating major home maintenance. Moisture proofing on the second floor, new plumbing, reinforcement on the stair beams. He furrowed his brow. What's that supposed to mean? It means you'll need to move out before it begins. It's not safe to live here during the renovation. And you won't need to move back in, because this house is no longer a shared space. He looked stunned, like he hadn't expected me to say it so plainly. Melissa walked in from the kitchen, wrapped in a robe, face bare, looking paler than usual. You're just kicking us out? She asked. I took a sip of orange juice. Not kicking. Clearing. You should be grateful I gave you a heads up. She let out a sharp laugh. Aren't you afraid people will say you're some cold-hearted old woman, throwing your own family onto the street? I met her gaze. If you're so concerned about what people might say, maybe you should be more concerned with what you've actually done. I didn't blink. You only called me Mom when you moved in, pretending you were here to take care of me. Now that you're not getting the house, suddenly you're the victim. You're not family, you're a parasite clinging to this home. It hit her like a slap. She staggered half a step back, her lips parted like she wanted to respond, but nothing came out. She turned sharply and hurried upstairs, footsteps stiff and fast like she'd been cut. Eric didn't finish breakfast either. He slammed his cup down, muttering, Mom, you're tearing this family apart. Kept my tone even. If this family only exists because I feed you, fund you, and let you go through my paperwork behind my back, then it's not a family. It's a scam. He stared at me, jaw clenched like he had more to say, but in the end he stormed out. In all these years he's barely had a straight conversation with me. It's always sideways complaints. Work's tough, Ethan's stressed, rent's outrageous. But never once has he said how he plans to pull his own weight. 3 days later, I saw a video pop up in our neighborhood's Facebook group. Melissa had posted it. The title, When You Do Everything Right and Still Get Treated Like a Stranger. She sat in our living room, eyes red-rimmed, saying how she gave up her career to care for her aging mother-in-law, how she poured her heart into creating a multi-generational home, only to be thrown out by a stubborn, unreasonable elder. She positioned herself just in front of the family portrait, the same one she had stashed in the garage weeks ago, now conveniently rehung as a backdrop for her pity parade. The comments exploded. Maybe she's got dementia? Do you know how rare it is for a daughter-in-law to move in with her Emil nowadays? I bet it's about money. That house is probably worth a fortune. I wasn't going to respond. But then Rosa showed up at my door, fire in her eyes and a tablet in her hands. You seen her video yet? She asked. I nodded. I underestimated her flair for fiction. She opened the tablet. Want to see what I commented? I smiled faintly. What did you write? She cleared her throat and read aloud. Hi, I'm Helen's neighbor and friend. I was there the day her husband's casket left this house. I've watched her grieve in silence while housing your whole family, covering every bill. Your husband won't hold a job, You film videos all day for profit, then criticize the woman whose old kitchen didn't fit your aesthetic. Now you're out and suddenly you're the martyr? Should I also post the Gucci receipt you bought using Helen's pension card? I lowered my head and laughed, shaking a little from it. How did you get her receipts? I asked. Rosa arched a brow. Sweetheart, this ain't my first dance with a plastic daughter-in-law. Less than a week later, Melissa's brand partners started dropping her one by one. All with the same reason, inconsistent with our family values. She posted a 24-hour story with swollen eyes whispering, "I gave everything and got stabbed in the back." I turned off my screen and walked to the study. Because none of it moved me anymore. The bookstore sat on the town's old commercial strip, tucked between a shuttered tailor shop and a consignment boutique that hadn't updated its window display since the Obama administration. The sign above the door was faded. White background, blue letters spelling out whispering pages, crooked just slightly, like the title of a forgotten literary club that had once believed in paper and ink more than likes and followers. When Rosa and I stepped inside, there were only a few bookshelves left and a scuffed wooden counter near the front. In the corner, 2 boxes of unopened used books sat like time capsules, waiting for a second life. The floorboards creaked under our feet. The air smelled like old paper, dust and something faintly earthy, mildew maybe, but I didn't mind. I felt strangely at home, like I'd wandered into a forgotten corner of my past that had been quietly waiting for me to return. Rosa turned to me. What do you think? I didn't answer right away. I walked around the counter, knelt down and touched the edge of the old baseboard heater. It was cold, chipped and solid. You know, I said, before David retired he actually suggested I apply for a small business grant and open a bookstore near home. I told him no. I kept thinking we should save the money for the family. He always said I put everyone else's needs ahead of mine, even when it came to buying a new edition of a book I loved. Rosa said nothing. She just stood there with me in the quiet. I looked up at the dusty glass window. A slant of sunlight hit the top of one of the boxes. The book on top was To Kill a Mockingbird. The corners were frayed, the spine worn. I reached down and opened it. On the title page someone had underlined a quote. People generally see what they look for and hear what they listen for. I thought of all the things Melissa used to say, I'm doing this for the family. Eric's lines, you don't understand what it's like out there financially. Ethan's complaints, why can't you be more like a normal grandma who supports her grandson? None of them ever asked what I wanted. Because they weren't really looking. Or listening. Just projecting. I closed the book and held it close to my chest. I want to rent this place, I said quietly. Not for income. For me. To remember who I was before I forgot. Rosa nodded. I was hoping you'd say that. That evening I rummaged through old boxes until I found it. My original copy of Little Women. The one David gave me. It had a deep burgundy hardcover, corners frayed to velvet. After 10 minutes of searching, I finally found it tucked in a storage basket under my old recliner. I sat down and opened it. On the inside cover, in his slanted handwriting, David had written, You're not just my wife. You have your own light. I hope you never forget where the switch is. My eyes burned. I traced my finger over those words for a long, quiet moment. For most of my life I had been so good at lighting the way for others and so terrible at finding the lamp for myself. But now I was ready to find the switch. The next morning, Rosa came over with 2 steaming cups of coffee and a stack of scrap paper. We sat at her kitchen table and started sketching ideas for the bookstore. What if we call it Helen and Rosa Books? She said with a grin. Sounds like a boutique and a war cry from 2 old ladies at the same time. I laughed. I love it. But I want a tagline. Something that says, you're never too old to read something new. Her eyes lit up. We smiled at each other like co-conspirators about to commit joy. The morning Melissa's social media presence began to unravel was unusually quiet. The maple tree outside my kitchen window had started to turn, its red leaves like a signal flare in slow motion. Rosa texted me 2 words, it's boiling. Her comment on Melissa's video had gone viral within hours. People started digging through Melissa's older videos. In one vlog, a sharp-eyed viewer zoomed in on the background and caught the edge of a legal document taped to the side of the fridge, a cease and desist letter from Naomi's firm. Next to it, partially visible, a printed pension adjustment notice. The internet did what it does best. Someone compared timestamps. She says this was filmed during her full-time care phase. But that day she was vlogging from a shopping mall, bragging about using senior benefits to score luxury deals. The top-voted comment? Supportive daughter-in-law? More like a financial predator with a tripod. The replies were relentless. She said she moved in to help, but now we know she was just hunting for the deed. This isn't a multi-generational home. This is a multi-generational extraction plan. God, what did that poor old lady do to deserve this? I didn't watch Melissa's response. I only saw that she'd finally taken down the video she'd pinned to the top of her profile. She always believed that if she controlled the camera she could control the narrative. But this time the lens showed something she never intended. The scheming, the hypocrisy, and that flicker of fear when the mask cracked. That afternoon Ethan burst into my house, slamming the door so hard the walls shivered. I was on the balcony repotting an old spider plant. He threw his backpack onto the couch and shouted, "Can you please stop making us look like trash?" I didn't answer. Just wiped the soil from my hands and went to pour myself some water. He followed me into the kitchen, eyes rimmed with red. "My classmates are saying my mom's a snake. That we're mooching off you. They're posting your picture, saying our whole family are leeches." I set down the kettle and turned to face him. He was still just a kid. A kid fed the wrong values. A kid who once saw me as an endless source. A kid now learning what consequences look like. I didn't yell. I just said softly, "You're ashamed because you know, not everything they're saying is wrong." He froze. "Your dad can't hold a steady job. Your mom built a whole online persona about being the dutiful daughter-in-law. They've been performing, for you for the world. And you've been in the act with them without ever asking me, did I want to be part of this show?" He lowered his head, fists clenched. I walked over and pulled a journal from the kitchen cabinet, placing it gently in front of him. "It's time to write your own story, Ethan. Not copy your father's script." He picked up the notebook without a word and left. A few days later, Eric showed up alone, holding a bouquet of wilting daisies. "Mom, can we talk?" he asked. I nodded but didn't invite him in. I sat on the porch's wicker chair. He joined me, his fingers nervously folding and unfolding the cellophane wrap around the flowers. "I know I messed up," he said, voice rough. "We pushed too hard, but can't you forgive us? Just this once." I let him speak. I watched him. "We can move back in. We won't fight about the house anymore. We'll start fresh, okay?" I shook my head slowly. "It's not about the house, Eric." He frowned. "Then what is it?" I looked him in the eye. "What you call starting fresh, what you really want, is to rewind to when you still had power over me. When you could use me, drain me, and still call it love. You don't want change, Eric. You want control back." He fell silent, face tightening as the illusion cracked. "I'm not your backdrop anymore," I said. "I'm your mother, not your emotional support wallet, not your fallback plan, and not your kid's full-time provider." I stood and folded the throw blanket neatly on the chair. "You can go now." He didn't argue. Just set the flowers on the porch step and walked away, his steps slow, heavy. The day the bookstore opened, the sky was perfect. Sunlight soft like an old photograph, warm without being harsh. We'd repainted the old sign above the door in soft gray, with forest green lettering that read, "Helen and Rosa Books." Beneath it, in delicate script, "Books, coffee, and a place to begin again." Outside, we propped a chalkboard easel with Rosa's message of the day. "Now open. All ages welcome. It's never too late to start over." I hadn't expected much traffic. No influencers, no giveaways. But by 10 a.m. people were trickling in. Some came for the half-off classic lit bundle. Others saw Rosa's post in the local Facebook group. A few were students from the nearby college, curious and wide-eyed. I stood behind the counter, watching it all unfold like a gentle tide, waves of people arriving, browsing, chatting. The air smelled of pages and espresso and quiet joy. A local radio journalist stopped by, wanting to feature us in a segment on silver entrepreneurs. "Can I ask you something, Helen?" she said, holding up her mic. "Do you think starting a business at your age is too late?" I smiled, gazing out the window. "I'm 68. A lot of people think this is the time to downsize, move into a retirement home, and do puzzles while listening to golden oldies. But I'd tell them, if your mind is still sharp and your heart is still beating, it's never too late. She nodded, then asked, "What made you finally take the leap?" I looked at the rows of books. Because I finally understood I'm not just someone's mother or wife or safety net. I'm a person. And I deserve to live my own story. That afternoon, as things quieted down, I was wiping the glass door when I saw a familiar silhouette outside. Ethan. He had his backpack slung over one shoulder, the notebook I'd given him clutched in his hand. He tapped his toe on the tiled entryway, hesitant. I opened the door. "Come in." He stepped inside like it was his first time entering a stranger's home. "I saw your YouTube interview," he mumbled. "Someone commented, 'I wish my grandma was this cool.'" He looked at me. "I didn't really get why you changed so much. But now I think I'm starting to." I smiled. "People change when they're willing to see who they used to be." He nodded. Then from his backpack he pulled out a new hardcover copy of The Giver. "Would you write something in it? I want to start journaling, but I don't know how." I opened the book and wrote on the inside page. "Write about the person you want to be, not the one your parents expect you to become." He took it quietly, whispered, "Thanks," and wandered toward the back of the store, slowly flipping pages. I stood there, feeling an unexpected lightness rise in my chest. Maybe this boy still had a shot. At 6, Rosa handed me a fresh cup of coffee. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Like I'm finally breathing real air," I replied. She patted my shoulder. "You know something? Your eyes don't look guarded anymore. They look like they're finally seeing the world." I smiled. There's still so much I haven't read. Before closing, I placed my old copy of Little Women on the front display shelf. Taped to the cover was a simple note. "For every woman who finally remembered how to love herself." The day Naomi came by with the finalized will, I wore a cream-colored sweater. Rosa had helped me pin on a ruby brooch, David's last birthday gift to me before he passed. We sat at the oak kitchen table signing the documents. Naomi organized the pages, her tone calm but resolute. "Once this is all filed, the house, your savings, and your pension will be distributed exactly as you choose. No one can touch it." I nodded and slid the signed papers into the folder she'd brought. I didn't leave the house to Eric. I didn't set up an education trust for Ethan. Instead, I chose 2 beneficiaries for everything I'd saved in my lifetime: the town's public library endowment, and the little bookstore Rosa and I had just opened. "I hope one day they understand," I told Naomi. "This wasn't about punishing them. I just chose to give what I built to those who truly understand its worth." Naomi closed the folder with a smile. "That's what freedom looks like, choosing for yourself." We turned part of the old living room into what we called our weekend reading room. Every Saturday and Sunday, teachers, volunteers, and some newly retired folks would bring children and teens to read, discuss, and write together. Sometimes we hosted book swaps. On our busiest days, even the porch steps were filled with readers. I often looked at that coffee table, the same one Melissa used to stage her Modern Luxe vlogs. Now it was piled with children's books, mugs of hot cocoa, and scribbled index cards. Now it felt like a space with a pulse. Ethan came by once. He didn't say much, just sat in the corner flipping through pages, occasionally glancing out the window at the maple tree like he was trying to find something he'd lost. I didn't interrupt. Some reconciliations don't arrive through words. They bloom in the stillness. That evening, Rosa brought out 2 mugs of hot tea. We sat in the porch's wicker chairs, a blanket draped over our feet, and a lazy little cat stretched between us. The neighbor's kid had brought her over, saying she liked napping near the bookstore door. "You know what I love most about this house?" Rosa asked. I shook my head. "The porch," she said, smiling. "You sit here no matter the weather, and you can always see where you've been, and know exactly where you stand." I nodded slowly. I used to ask myself, what is a home? I think I finally figured it out. A home isn't something you give away to make others feel comfortable. It's the place where you finally feel safe. She laughed. "You talk like a podcast guest now." I laughed too. "Funny you say that. I'm actually going to be one." The podcast was produced by the community library, titled Second Chapters, A New Life for Women. The host was a gentle-voiced writer close to my age. Near the end of the episode, she asked me, "Helen, if you could say one thing to the woman you were 3 years ago, what would it be?" I paused, then leaned toward the mic and said slowly, "They thought I was old, easy to manipulate, easy to isolate. They thought I feared being alone, feared losing a place to live, feared being cast out of my family. But what they forgot is, I was the woman who used to run the library. The wife who kept a family afloat for 20 years. The mother who sat up all night when her child had a fever. I smiled just a little. I'm Helen Monroe. The house is mine, and so is my life. The host nodded, her eyes bright. I think that line's going to live in a lot of hearts for a very long time. That night, walking home under a pale blue sky, I passed by the bookstore. The window glowed softly from within. A teenage girl was curled up in the corner seat, writing in a notebook, a cup of tea beside her. I didn't go in. Just pulled my coat tight and stepped inside my front door. At the end of the hallway, a single maple leaf had blown in, landing softly on the wooden floor with a crisp little pat. I stood still and whispered, "Good night, home."